Hello, everybody. We were at a venue in Nottingham for the Resistance Festival, the Festival of Resistance last weekend, and I've come away with a really bad cough and cold. Sian has gone on holiday, and Chris is taking a much-needed break. So, excuse me. We're going to be catching up today with Chris Jones from XR Scientists, that's Extinction Rebellion Scientists, and Steve Gower from Insulate Britain, because we didn't get much time at the festival to interview them properly. So, they're both subjects that I'm really interested in. Extinction Rebellion started here in Stroud, and where I live. And I'm really interested in these subjects, and I think the general public are under a misapprehension about their intents and purposes behind the actions that they both pursue. So I'd like to start talking to Chris, please. But first of all, we'd like to show a video. Hi, Chris.
MPs are answering people who are writing to them and saying that the UK government is doing enough to reach its own targets, net zero in 2050. But is that really the case?
The Committee on Climate Change, so the government's official own watchdog for how it is doing on climate change, in its latest report highlighted that the government and that the current policies that the government is implementing is not enough to reach the goals and the carbon budget that the government has set itself. Now, these carbon budgets were even not yet in line with the more stringent long-term goal that it has set itself, the net zero greenhouse gas goal in 2050. So it is absolutely clear that at present, government sources themselves, the Committee on Climate Change themselves, highlights that the government is not doing enough to reach its own goals.
Right, Chris. So we've shown this video of the scientists giving us some data about the XR scientists, and I particularly wanted to talk to you about how you felt that. Why did you get involved with the Festival of Resistance? Because I wanted you to be involved. We all wanted you to be involved, because if we don't work together across political spectrums, across all spectrums, class spectrums, if we don't work together, we're not going to beat this climate problem that we're facing. So why did you accept our invitation?
Absolutely. So for me, I've spent the last sort of 2 years wrangling with the most effective ways of helping play my part in dealing with the climate crisis. As someone that's spent many years teaching science in the classroom and trying to deal with misconceptions, for me, it was a brilliant sort of starter opportunity to promote the message that we are in a process of ecocide, and ultimately every great collaborative action, such as joining Resist Fest, really gives the message more voice and effectively a level of communication.
Yeah, greater audience.
So yeah, being able to be involved with it has been a fantastic opportunity, and also I think it's really important that we keep pushing this message that what we're doing needs to change, and ultimately I hope that the COP26 conference that's coming up soon is going to be another really important step in our journey as well.
Well, you say that. You see, for me, I'm rather cynical, and I think that the COP26 is just more greenwash, but it does provide us with an opportunity as activists to go along to COP26, or even, COP26 Bristol. The trade unions are, sorry, creating a union bloc, which are doing a separate event at the same time in Bristol, Jeremy Corbyn is going up to Glasgow to do an alternative COP26 meeting outside of COP26. DM25, which is a European, Yanis, I can't remember, Varoufakis, is the Greek, he was the Greek finance minister, I believe. I hope I've got that right. Apologies if I haven't, Yanis. He's doing an alternative COP26 as well in Glasgow, or at least on Zoom. Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, has decided that he won't go to the COP26. He's going to Zoom in. And a lot of other participants that wouldn't ordinarily be able to take part, hopefully they'll be able to take part, because they'll be able to Zoom in as well. So they won't have to make those treacherous journeys. They can show what it's actually like in their own country, because we're quite cosseted here, aren't we, in the UK? We don't see a huge amount of climate change. We did see London flooding for the first time ever, I believe, with such severity anyway. So people are, and we see videos from around the world, but of course that's once removed. It's not actually affecting us personally, is it?
The biggest worry from my perspective is that where we are, we're actually in a very similar line to Russia, and they are very, very snow covered, and we are protected by the warm water that flows up towards Britain. And when global warming will potentially disrupt that and make Britain significantly colder and icier. So, which for some people will seem like an unusual concept, but we may get colder as a country, not warmer, as a result of global warming. So that's a really, really critical kind of thing that we need to be aware of, is that some of the changes that we see may be difficult to attribute to global warming because it may be counterintuitive. But yeah, so those are certain significant dangers and risks for us, as well as the as you mentioned, the flooding risk as well. Really, really, I released something on one of my channels earlier about the model, and you look at Britain, and it's the Highlands of Scotland and the middle part of Britain that's essentially left if you get rid of even just the Greenland ice sheet, 8 meters of sea level rise. So those things are critical for us to keep thinking about and understanding.
Yeah, and here in Stroud, we're rather high up, so we are going to be relatively unaffected in the short term by such things. But of course, it will impact us, because everybody from the lower lands will be coming here, won't they? And the thing is, I did suggest to the Peace and Justice Project, which is the ones, Jeremy Corbyn's group, that's doing an alternative COP26, I did suggest that we set up a climate refugee camp outside of COP26, because there's no transport up there for a start. Well, hardly any transport. One, due to the unions striking for better pay and conditions for public transport, but also there's a serious police presence around there, very serious police presence. And they've been trained, they're armed, and they've got dogs, and they're trained to remove us. So getting our voices heard above that is going to be very difficult. And the mainstream media don't report anything, of course, unless it tallies with the corporate narrative of the greedies, we call them. We don't call them the elite anymore, because that's showing them deference. We'll call them the greedies, those who've stripped and raped our land and raped the entire world. So to get on to your actual workshop at the Festival of Resistance, I hear you blew bubbles, and I asked you about that, and you said, well, that was just really an icebreaker. So
yeah,
the audience. So what did you take from your chance to work with people who would not ordinarily perhaps agree with any of your actions or achievements that you wanted to make?
Well, I mean, it was one of the major things that I took away from the opportunity was a fantastic set of micro discussions framed around climate science denial, around the climate science conversation, and also then just general questions. And you know, the really significant thing that I learned was what are people's opinions. We had two completely different sets of audiences on both days, and the sets of questions were really helpful for me, because I'm going to be interviewing scientists over the next couple of weeks for COP26.tv, and the questions that came up, I can pose, and we can then use that to help build understanding and make sure that people realize what we're trying to achieve. Because the ultimate thing is, yes, we're inconveniencing you short term, but long term, we're trying to prevent something not just inconvenient, but essentially ecocide. And
yeah, life-changing, absolutely life-changing. And I apologise to Extinction Rebellion, of which I am a founder member. I should have mentioned COP26 TV and Vlad and the team, the entire team that are going to be broadcasting for the entire 12, is it 12 days or 12-hour days?
right.
I can't remember now.
So 12-hour days, so effectively 144 hours of content, and you know, some amazing interviews, and just like the voices from the global south as well, because that they sometimes don't quite get the voice that they need.
Yeah, well, we've as at Extinction Rebellion head office, so to speak, in the press arena, we've been trying on alternative media and independent media. We have some really fantastic press outlets that carry the stories that Extinction Rebellion bring us. So we are trying to do as much as we can, and I can't tell you enough, people out there watching this video. Please look at COP26 TV, and we'll put the links into everything, because without us all learning about our situation, and please try and ignore just 99, if not 100% of what mainstream media are telling you, because they're not serving your interests. They're serving corporate interests. They're serving other people's interests, the people who already destroyed our world. They're serving their interests, not ours.
A massive healthy level of skepticism for every piece of information. I mean, that was one of the other major kind of things that we discussed in the workshop, was being skeptical, because that's the way of the scientist. The way of the scientist is to try and understand and criticize to the point where the information does not fall away, and the truth is left.
Yeah, and it change. You've got to be open to changing your mind, haven't you? Because we all have preconceived ideas, and they're bred into us from birth by our exposure to our neighbours, our friends, our relatives, and they're all exposed to mainstream media the same as us. So we've built up this narrative that we are a cozy little community, us human beings, and that's not actually the case. You know, we think nothing of going out and hunting foxes. We think nothing of going out and taking trophies as hunters, and killing to extinction other species on this planet, which, you know, are integral to our well-being. We discover after they're gone. You know, it's like the bees. You know, once the bees are gone and they've stopped it. You know, a friend of mine, Simon B, from Extinction Rebellion Stroud, he's a forager, and he took a camera team from mainstream media out with him one day, and he said he was stood in the middle of nowhere, and he said, "Can listen to this?" And they stopped and listened, rolled the camera and listened, and they said, "Well, what are we supposed to be listening to?" And he said, "Well, that's it. There's nothing, no insects, no bees, no pollinators, no nothing."
Yeah.
And that is what we're facing, isn't it? Complete ecocide. How will we grow crops if we've got plenty of water coming, but we've got no sun, we've got cold weather coming, and we've got no insects? So we've killed them all with our pesticides, perhaps.
Yeah, and you know, then you ending up talking about food security, and it's a very, very important thing that people take for granted. I think sometimes people are reminded when they see like the shelves being empty, you know, and that's just a minor event of maybe lorries being trapped at a border. Well, you know, what happens if all the crops fail because, you know, it's too cold, or, you know, the climate has changed so significantly that you know, that they're unable to grow anymore. You know, these are things that we are facing, and our goal of 2050 is so deeply inappropriate that we kind of need to shift our expectations and our actions much sooner.
And also, we're told by the narrative coming from mainstream media and our government and the world's governments that it's something that we have to do ourselves. You know, so while it is absolutely essential that we stop consuming plastic wrapped goods, it is absolutely essential that we try and become not just so dependent on meat. It is vital that we do these things as people that want to make our contribution, but also the corporate entities, you know, like Shell, like BP, you know, all these people that have raped and pillaged our world in pursuit of wealth, because that's all it comes down to, is they want more money so that they can live a high. Look at all these Jeff Bezos and everybody who and Virgin, Richard Branson went to space. Why did they go to space? How could they afford to go to space? Actually, you and I were paying for them to go to space, actually, because we paid our Sky subscription or our Virgin subscription or
Or
our
we ordered
Amazon.
from Amazon. Yeah.
There you go. So, you know, it's absolutely essential that we, and if people are smeared as well, that's another point that I wanted to get across, was that we in the press, in the independent media, we look, when we get a story, we look for who can confirm that or who can talk knowledgeably on that subject. So every time we go to a scientist for confirmation of this concept or story that we want to put out, they say, oh, actually, you've got it completely around the wrong way. It's this. And so we put the alternative story out, which is actually the truth. And then we get shut down on Facebook and social media because it's said that Facebook, for example, will say, I'm sorry, but that person is not on our list of knowledgeable, accepted subject, you know, accepted knowledgeable people on this subject. So they've been smeared and shut down. Have you found that a lot with XR scientists?
So a lot of, not all, but a lot of them are scientists at university currently researching. You know, so we have a very good sort of knowledge base of people that are within that, and you know, there are people that do get shut down, but we also then have that level of knowledge base as well, which is why I really enjoy working with and around them, because if some of the smartest people in the room are saying, hang on, maybe we need to be thinking about this.
Yeah.
Why would you go against that? Why would you think that, you know, that they've looked at all of this for years and years and years, and to provide an alternative narrative against that? Well, there has to be an agenda there. But the ultimate goal is, smearing is a tactic used in climate science denial all of the time. You know, even practicing professors at universities that have, you know, even won Nobel Prizes and things like that. You know, so they have credentials from you know, peer reviewed, very, very
absolutely
highly
verified.
regarded.
Yeah. And they are. So please, people at home, be very aware that you're being fed a narrative. You're always being fed a narrative, and really, if someone's being smeared and lied, or if someone's being questioned, their knowledge is being questioned, and their standing in our communities are being questioned, you've got to ask yourselves why. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Steve Gower from Insulate Britain. And first of all, we'd like to play a short video. And we would like Chris to stay with us, because we're going to be talking about, it's all related, and we're going to be talking about Steve's other campaign to help the homeless. So please, could you play that video now, Gaz?
There is no other thing that we can do. We've tried everything. And so we're asking the government to insulate homes as a serious first step towards doing something about the climate emergency, which is destroying humanity and all other living beings.
Well, there you have it. This lady was the head of housing at a London council, we won't name it. And she has spent a lot of years working within this capitalist system and working in housing. Exactly. So tell us a little bit, Steve, if you can, about Insulate Britain and what it's hoping to achieve and why it's hoping to achieve it.
Hi, thanks Lizzie for having me on the programme today. Insulate Britain, we've basically got two demands. One is to insulate all the houses, all the council houses and all the social housing within the country by 2025, and to retrofit the rest, all the housing stock, by 2030. Reason being that 15% of our CO2 emissions actually come from the home. And what other people may not realise is that where I'm sitting now is my one-bedroom flat, which is, I think it was built in 1810, actually emits more, or the energy that keeps me warm and puts the lights on in my property emits more CO2 than a family car. So I know a lot of people are saying, well, we've got to get the cars off the road and what have you, but the actual bigger polluter is obviously there's more homes than there are cars. And yeah, we're trying to make people aware of the fact that of this issue, especially just before COP26, which is happening in the next couple of days or weeks. So that's basically it. We're waiting for a meaningful statement from our Prime Minister to say that he will abide by that promise. It's not the first time the government of the day have promised us insulation. Back in 2001, when the government of the day promised to do exactly the same thing, as in insulate all the council and social housing properties, because they realised that there was at that point there were 50,000 people dying each year in their home through the cold. Nothing has happened in them 20 years. In fact, I think we're going slightly backwards. And we're just saying we don't want words, we don't want money, we want boots on the ground. And when he gives a meaningful statement that he'll provide the money and provide the boots on the ground and dates when it be completed, then we'll be off the streets. So, and it'll mean making thousands, tens of thousands of meaningful jobs. I was talking to a bit, I don't want to go on a bit, but I was on the first block, and the first confrontation I had or talk I was having with the public were actual builders, and I was trying to get through to them that regardless of what they're hard-working people, but they're making properties today that are not fit for purpose, and that is still the case even now, a couple of days after the government have promised a warm weather paper statement. They are still not admitting that the properties that are being built today are already out of date. If the housing standards with regards to the environmental issues haven't changed in about 100, 115, 20, 50, 150 years. So this house that I'm sat in now, 1810, probably the standards of it hasn't changed a lot up until today. That can't be right. I don't want I don't want to buy a gramophone record today when we got iPads and God knows what. You know, that's what we're building. We're building gramophone records. All right, this is the 21st century. That's it, Lizzie, in a nutshell, I think.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, you came from, by the way, everybody, Steve won an award, the We Are One award, for his services to the community in respect of advocating for the homeless in our area. Steve lives up the road from me, and it came from that, didn't it? This joining with Insulate Britain, because Steve is a socialist through and through. Hardcore Labour Party member until, of course, the witch hunt, which most of us fell foul of. So most of us are divorced from the Labour Party, if not completely abused by it.
Yeah, good point, Lizzie, and yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, it was a shock. It was a welcome shock. It was 3 weeks or 4 weeks into the Insulate Britain campaign. I actually had time off to arrive at the ceremony, and yeah, fortunately took away the nomination. A little bit of karma was the fact that there were Labour Party members in the audience who aren't quite
delighted in getting rid of you.
I can't say that, right? You can say what you want, no comment. But it was a lot of karma when I come away with that. Yeah.
Well, congrats, Steve.
Thank you.
Yeah, well
Thank you.
well
Yeah, I don't do it for the awards or anything. I've been doing it as a volunteer for about 4 or 5 years since I was homeless. And I advocate for the homeless, and I see every day or most days that the poverty that's in not only my town but Stroud and Cheltenham. And I knew about XR because obviously they were, like you say, Lizzie, they were from just up the road from me in Stroud, and they'd often come to the county council doing their thing. But they knew me.
Available seat.
Yeah, they knew I was going to talk about homeless issues. They say, Steve, you go on first and we'll go on after you. So it was all right. But when I got to say that it's always close to my heart, you know, the environment. But as soon as Insulate Britain come together, and the fact that it was mentioning and campaigning on behalf of the most vulnerable, which are the ones that are in fuel poverty, and that includes food poverty as well, it hit the button for me personally, and I just leapt at the chance. And even though I'm currently I'm a volunteer advocate and I'm unemployed, with the unemployment and the poverty that I'm living in, and that's including fuel poverty, it gives me a sense of independence, so I can actually challenge. And it's a shame that we're in a country that's supposed to be democratic, and in the 21st century as well, the individuals that want to speak the truth and see what they say on the streets, as well as other social issues, can't because of the system that we're in today.
Yeah, they'll be shut down. They'll lose their job.
They'll be shut down. I can be shut down, and I probably will be, or possibly will be, after this campaign. I've got loads of
possibly after this show, Steve.
Possibly after this show, yeah. But I'm willing to take that. I'm willing to take that extra step forward and be counted, because if I don't know, well, not me personally, but I mean, because there's hundreds of us on IB, and if we don't do something now, nothing else will change. And this is the moment now to stand up and be counted. Some of the sacrifices, especially the financial sacrifices that people are taking for IP. You mentioned the individual there that was a CEO. We've got doctors, we've got nurses, I think. We've got a load of professional individuals, and the young as well. They're just coming through in life, you know what I mean? Want to make a mark, but just can't get on the ladder of living. And what future have they got in 20 or 30 years if nothing changes? There is no future for them. They can see that. Some of them have even decided not to have children. What's that about? How on earth can we have a civilization in this country in the 21st century where they don't want to have children?
Yeah,
it's sickening, awful. That Boris Johnson, and I got to say it, and I think a lot of people may agree with me or may not. I don't care. He's the traitor of this country. He's the one that should be having all these high court injunction notes on him. It's his responsibility to look. He's got one job, to look after us, and he's doing absolutely abysmal.
Well,
sorry, yeah, Lizzie, go on.
Well, no, I really wanted you to speak, so I would like it if you want to finish your sentence. I apologise for butting in.
Yeah, he should be the one with the high court judgments. He's got one job to do, and that's to look after us. If he can't do it, then get somebody else. And in fact, I don't think there is anything in that parliament that can do it. So that begs the question, what else can you do? But it's a question, serious question we're all going to have to think about, because they're a liability. The government are, definitely. And what comes behind them, God knows what's going to happen. And I think that's why I was so privileged and glad that Chris asked me to come. I've known Chris for about 3 or 4 years when he was actually...
Chris Williamson, you're talking...
Chris Williamson, sorry. Yeah, I've known Chris for about 3 or 4 years, I think, and he was in solidarity with me then about the homeless issue, bless him. And then since we know what's happened until then, but he's still been in contact with me, and I've been in contact with him. And I'm so glad to have met similar-minded people that can actually talk about a subject that they got in common, and the home is a common ground that everyone can talk about. There's no differentiating home, and a home is should be a safe refuge. In fact, after the Second World War, that there was within the Human Rights Act, it's stated in there that everyone is entitled to live in a safe and warm environment within their own home. That's not me saying that. That's what they come to realize, the League of Nations, after the Second World War, after all the sacrifices, that the home was one of the most important foundations for family and for well-being. Yet it's being dismantled stupendously ever since that quote was ever made. We've had reductions in council houses, especially in the last 10 years, reductions in council houses, social housing, and God knows what, and poverty-stricken people. This is a human right. Forget about the class. There's only two classes. There's the ruling class and the rest of us. All right? Forget about the working class and whatever, middle class and lower class, whatever. It's a human right. Excuse me. It's a human right that everyone should have a home, and everyone should remember that. We're not asking for something that we're not entitled to, and what our fathers or forefathers fought for in a massive war, obviously, but we got something coming even worse now with the...
Chris worked with street kitchens, and I've worked with Streets Kitchen as well. Years ago when he first started, we put together a march with the homeless, and we walked around London trying to make people aware that how many thousands of people are sleeping on the streets in our capital city.
Well, there's more empty buildings than there are homeless people,
exactly.
And that's just mad. That's insane.
It is. Yes.
I was going around the streets just before because I've done a campaign on 2 general elections, and I was going around the streets and talking to the homeless there. And the word around 2017 was all the foreigners have got our homes and all that. I was saying no, not exactly that. Do you know how many homes there?
It's not that at all, really. That is a narrative.
I done a freedom of information request, Lizzie, and it was, I think, there was 5,500 properties in Gloucestershire, and there was at that time the council was saying 23 or 24 people were homeless. Whatever the real figure was, and I can come to that later on if you wish, it would certainly outnumber the amount of people that were on the street. And once they realised that, they were saying, "What?" I was saying, "Yeah." So it's not the foreigners. We could house all the refugees and God knows what as we wanted, and yourselves, and your parents, and even your children, and God knows what. There are multitudes of empty properties, not only in Gloucester but in the country, as Chris just mentioned. Now, I think there's about over 200,000 empty properties, and the last count on the homeless or threatened homeless was 90,000. I'm not a mathematician, but I can work that bit out. So that's a myth.
Yeah. Well, there we go. And also it feeds into the Insulate Britain's campaign, and its objectives feed into the story that people say, well, we need to heat our homes, so we need to build more nuclear, we need more fossil fuels so that we can heat these homes. No, actually, you're at the crux of this. If we don't insulate our homes, then we've got heat escaping through the building itself. So
Yeah,
it doesn't matter
exactly.
how many thousands of pounds you spend a year on your heating. What's the point if it's all just going out of the walls or out of the windows or out of the roof?
Yeah. Since I started this campaign, not started, but since I joined this campaign, we got builders and architects and what have you within the context of the environmental side of it. We have got the capability now, and people are living in properties where they can reduce your heating bills to almost zero. Okay, that means not even having to turn the heating on. You don't even need the heating because it enclose all the heat that you need at a comfortable temperature, which means that the likes of wind and solar is an advantage, and you can get probably an excess of electricity. What they're offering now, if I can go back to like last week, or a couple of weeks ago with what Boris is offering, it's only going up to a capacity of an environmental rating of C. We got properties that, like I just mentioned, that are A++. That's what we want, Boris. That's what the government should be giving us, and I mean that, giving us, to all the social houses and all the council houses in this country. And then the private sector will have an abundance of materials that'll be a lot cheaper then, and the private sector can have them at near enough cost price, I don't know, but a lot cheaper than what it is at the moment. The technology's there already, so we're not living in low cuckoo land. The technology's there, it's just the will isn't, and that will has got
the political will isn't there. And I think the thing that you're talking about is Boris Johnson or the government saying that they're going to provide air source and ground source heat pumps to properties.
That's great. If you haven't insulated your house, it'll cost you a fortune. It'll cost you more than gas.
Well,
so
actually, it won't, because I have air source heat pump technology. Have had it for ages. Mainly, I was going to have solar panels as well, but I live in the middle of a forest, so I don't get much natural light. So it's solar panels were deemed valueless, worthless for me. But like you say, if your house isn't insulated, and my house, actually, I did insulate it in 2001 when the government offered it, and some guys came out and drilled holes in the walls, stone building, drilled holes in the walls and pumped in all these little tiny polystyrene bubbles, tiny little minuscule polystyrene bubbles. So that was 20 years ago, and they plugged the holes after they'd finished pumping all this plastic polystyrene into my home, and they plugged the holes and went off. And when I opened one of my doors to a back room, they'd forgotten about the fact that they'd installed air vents in the walls. The builders had built air bricks into the walls. So I couldn't get the door open, and I thought, why can't I get the door open? When I pushed, I found that the entire room was filled with these polystyrene bubbles. So there was no insulation in the walls whatsoever. They're still coming out now, 20 years later, underneath the bath. The panel behind your bath. Underneath there is all the plumbing, which has got holes through the wall for the drains and for the access to the water pipes. So underneath my bath is now lovely and insulated because it's full of these polystyrene bubbles. So
Well,
You know,
we'll have
just
thousands.
the government saying that they're going to initiate these programs doesn't actually mean that it's going to benefit anyone. The only people it benefited was the company they employed to do this. It was with a grant, you know, the government grant. The company that they employed to go and do this project, and even the people working installing the bubbles weren't qualified to do that job. They didn't know the building type. They didn't have the knowledge that they should have had. So it was all a complete waste of everybody's time and money.
Lizzie, at this current trajectory of what Boris has offered on the table, with a couple of £1 billion for insulating the homes, you might be interested to know that at that current rate of money that he's financed.
Oh yes, that was what I wanted.
And we know that this is a climate crisis, and we've got to do something within the next 3 to 5 years, as what Sir David King mentioned. Well, with Boris's purse strings, the next time you'll see somebody coming at your door offering you some insulation will be in the next 540 years.
Yeah.
So don't hold your breath.
I couldn't believe that when you were telling us that 540 years it will take for the 2001 rollout of insulation to actually happen.
Well, this is Boris's contract, the one he's recently put on the table now. So it's got the 2001 went in 2011, because then what they realised is that the government of the day, which was then a coalition government, must have thought, whoa, we can't do this, it's impossible, or we can't do it because it's going to cost too much, or whatever excuses they wanted to say. So they give us a payment. So what they've done was give you the warm weather the cold weather payment. Cold weather payment, £140. It hasn't changed in 10 years. It's still £140. So they were advocating for fossil fuels to be pumping out the CO2 into the atmosphere, going into your home and seeping out of your walls and the cavities and windows and God knows what. And as we are today, yeah.
And then giving you £140 if you're unable to work, or if you're on benefits most people on benefits are actually in work. It's just that they don't earn enough to pay the bills. So you get this cold weather payment of £140 from the government, and you have to pay that £140 plus a hell of a lot more to the elite global corporation that owns our nuclear or fossil fuel fed generators of electricity.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Chris, let's bring you back in. What do you think of all this, you know, as related to the XR scientists?
Well, just from my perspective as a science teacher, you know, the key thing that there is a section where you actually teach about insulation and how critical it is to just you know, even just reduction of bills. If we forget about the climate crisis and just try and communicate on a human to human level, you know, some human beings have limited resources, and so where their resources are stretched, and they may get even more stretched because fuel prices are rising. You know, there was an announcement when EDF sort of took over the energy, that all of the whole of Britain's bills will be going up. You know, and so the most vulnerable are going to keep relentlessly getting hit by these price increases, and so therefore insulation is absolutely critical as a component for dealing with the climate crisis. Obviously, as you're absolutely spot on in saying, well, there's no point in building all of these you know, different solutions to powering homes and heating homes if ultimately the level of efficiency of these homes, and you're just wasting all of that energy when actually you increase the building efficiency and retention of heat. You're going to save lives, and ultimately then take a step towards dealing with the climate crisis, which is what we all should be doing. Every component of society, every human being within society needs to be doing that.
Yeah. Well, so Steve, when you were talking at the panel, at the workshop at the Festival of Resistance, how did you find your audience? Did you find them accepting of what you were saying, or arguing with you, or questioning?
I think they were surprised with some of the, and it was great to have a scientist with me as well to back me up, because I'm not a scientist, I'm just a consumer, and I'm worried about the future of my family and myself and the people that I advocate for. Yeah, it was similar sort of questioning regarding the tactics that we were using, as in through IB, and why were we doing it that way? The actual
why are you making ordinary people suffer trying to get to work, and you're blocking the road?
Exactly, yeah. They seem to appreciate that there was a climate crisis and something around the corner, and they could see that there was food and fuel poverty, but they couldn't quite get the they could. They were just skeptical about what we were doing. And all I can say is that I've already mentioned about 2001. So there's been campaigns for years, over the last 20, 30 years, regarding fuel poverty and climate. And there's been petitions. I've done petitions. I've talked to my MP countless times regarding poverty and what have you, and housing. I've been on marches, not only for poverty, but also for Honda. I'm a community member, a Unite community member. So I've done the industrial side of it as well, sticking up for the Honda workers, nurses, the doctors as well, and hospitals, a number of issues, and we still got the problem, and problems. This is the only this is obviously my first non-violent direct action that I've participated in, and possibly it's the only one that's happened in the country in the 21st century. I might be told different on that. It's got to the stage where we've done everything that we can or can do within the remit of demonstration and campaign, and what all we can do now is the non-violent direct action. That's what it's got to, just to get the government to listen. And the reason,
are they listening though? Because all they do is they pull out their narrative people, like one of the Gallagher brothers, wasn't it, who went on social media and tweeted you, didn't he? There we go. Noel Gallagher on Insulate Britain. Why can't they be legally run over, or at least thrown off a bridge? It's effing middle-class white idiots with F all better to do. It's middle-class white effing idiots who need a kick in the balls and then thrown in the Thames. They're just D. I don't know about what the D stands for, but doesn't that tell you that you're working class as they come, Steve? Chris, I don't know about you, your background, but myself,
my parents both came from council estates.
If you want to talk about class, and Gallagher, where did he come from, for God's sake? The roughest area in Manchester, wasn't it?
Well, I assume so. Yeah,
Isn't that the whole basis of his songs?
I actually tweeted with regards to that. I'd only seen that caption up on social media, and I was just aghast that somebody that started life in a council estate
should be on our side.
Your side. Should be on our side. Just turned his back, and I mentioned that in the tweet. I think, no, we apologise for obviously any delays that you may have had, or the people that are unfortunate enough to have been in the jams. But please go home and sit in the mirror and have a look, and just look at yourself and say, but for the grace of God, that could have been him, as in the predicament that myself and others, 7 million, may I state, are in, living in fuel and food poverty. So yeah, bit of a shock. Obviously he's got nothing to do during the course of the day, and or he's been held up while he, I don't know, goes and visits somebody or wherever. I haven't got a clue.
I thought you went everywhere by helicopter these days anyway.
There you go. I don't know. I wouldn't know. A bit of a sidetrack, but the bigger picture is the fact that people are standing up for for other people's lives. Some of them are like I said, professionals, but they're putting their houses and their financial status on the line here.
Yeah.
I'm putting my liberty at line because I haven't got no collateral or capital, but I'm willing to do that, and they're willing to do that for the greater good. And for someone from a council estate who has seen it, all right, and then just turned his back on it, and others, because it's not just him, I dare say. How they can sleep at night, I don't know. So yeah, it's what it is, Lizzie, and I'm not going to lose no sleep over him or any of the others either, because I know that what I'm doing will hopefully make a slight bit of difference to not only the ones that are vulnerable today, but the ones that haven't even been born yet. All right, they haven't got an advocate. All right. They ain't even created yet, but they're going to come into a world that could be absolutely awful, and not one that I was born into, which was with a council house, guaranteed, and a doctor, and the rest that comes with it. So yeah, let it be what it is. But yeah, I'm not going to lose no sleep over no.
Well, before we show the closing video, the closing videos, we're going to show you a video from the XR scientists about the education of our children going to a museum for the first time and being fed the lies from the likes of Shell and BP about how they're greenwashing the situation and pretending that they're these people who care about these children's lives when actually they don't care at all. And we're also going to be showing a song that one of your colleagues wrote and performed on video to Gallagher. I can't remember which one it is. Is it Noel or Liam? Anyway, whichever.
No. But can I say, Lizzie, before we finish, is that they have admitted that there was 8,500 people died through the cold 2 years ago in 2019. That was the last figure taken. All right, don't take them figures for granted, because they're always below. They're very conservative numbers. We're talking tens of thousands of people that won't be here this time next year. Tens of thousands of vulnerable individuals not dying because they got a serious illness, which does happen obviously, or a car accident or anything like that. We're talking about people that are dying in their homes, which is supposed to be a safe haven, and they're dying through the cold. Just remember that. Thank you.
And then when you think about Chris's the fact that all these people, we're going to be experiencing more cold, most likely in this country. I think that we will be getting colder and we will be getting wetter, and we'll have floods, and most of the land will be unusable because of these floodplains we've been building on for 40 years. We've made no attempt at collateral damage, even for the fact that we've built on floodplains. We haven't provided basic sewerage services. Look at today, was it, or yesterday, the other day, the Tories talked out a motion to prevent water companies, private water companies, from pumping sewage directly into our water, albeit sea. And you can argue that, I mean, years ago in the 40s, after the Second World War, people would use, and you still get sewage pumped over fields because it does make soil fertile, but also it killed an entire island up off of Scotland.
There are all sorts of issues with regard to obviously sewage runoff, with regard to eutrophication, and then essentially just vast swathes of water courses and things like that can be either poisoned or essentially drained of life.
So have we mentioned? Don't forget, we import over 50% of our food. So if you think there's shortages now because of the Brexit and God knows what and lorry drivers, you haven't seen anything yet until in the next 30 or 40 years through crop famines. And Chris will hopefully back me up on this. And what's around the corner there won't be no food on the shelves, and that will bring on a lot of other issues, social issues.
Yeah, 100%. It's food scarcity and food insecurity is definitely something that we need to be taking in mind again, human to human. The reality is that, oh, well, I won't be able to get this or that, or actually any of this stuff. Oh, what am I going to eat now then? That those questions need to be asked before that happens, not after the fact.
Yeah. Well, I know that a few years ago we were looking at this actual subject of people eating insects. So we would breed locusts and all sorts of little worms and grubs that we wouldn't ordinarily take a second look at, and forming them into some kind of burger so that they would be acceptable as a substitute for meat, and for the fact that we're not going to have these sort of flour. Are we going to be able to produce flour? Because are we going to be able to grow wheat, corn?
Well, and obviously reducing our rice consumption as well, because rice is a big methane producer and also a massive greenhouse gas producer. So shifting some level of thought process into less polluting food crops is going to be quite significant for everyone across the world.
It is, and just on the subject of insects, and now less than 3 years after a huge amount of government program of trying to get everybody into the idea that they may be eating insects, it turned into that we haven't got any insects left. So in this country, we've got hardly any insects left. So how are we going to eat insects if there aren't any? So we really aren't putting any thought into how we're going to deal with the situation we're in now, let alone the situation we're going to be in. But so we'll play to the audience watching and listening. We'll play those videos now, and thank you. I would just like to say thank you so much for bringing your discussion to the table, both Chris Jones from XR Scientists and Steve Gower from Insulate Britain. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, guys.
Hi, I'm Jen, and I'm a data science researcher. I love science, and I love the Science Museum. I came here as a child, and I've brought my own children here. We come to the museum to hear stories, to learn about science and innovation, and to be inspired. Stories are how we as humans influence and teach and inspire. We're in a climate and ecological emergency, so it matters who gets to tell the story. When you let Shell sponsor an exhibition like this, you allow them to co-opt the story of scientists and climate experts who've contributed and make them their own. You allow the visitors to the museum to leave believing that Shell are a benevolent benefactor in the story of the climate emergency. But Shell aren't. They aren't interested in finding solutions. Shell are not looking to take the radical steps needed to limit global heating. Their model is one of extractivism and profit, of exploitation and of green smoke and mirrors. They are the problem, not the solution. And their sponsorship of this museum is an insult to the future of every child who walks through those doors to learn, maybe for the first time, about the amazing things that we can achieve as humans through science.
This is to Mr. Noel Gallagher, who thinks I and my friends should be run over by cars and thrown into the river for wanting to protect all of our children. Please read the Chatham House report. Have a look what is really going on in the world. We have been sold out and our kids need us to grow up, not incite violence on each other, and those doing all we can to stop this madness. No! You're a dickhead. You bought the media's lies and they're twisted. Yep, I've done things I never expected. Because there's no time. No, I'm a mother. So please don't expect me to swallow. Our government's abuse, no, don't bother. Our kids aren't fine. And we want you to know that we've been sold out now. COP's a waste of time. a real waste of time. We just want you to see that we've been sold out now. 1.5, it's a lie, it's a huge lie. I knew that back in the carrot pot. There's lots of lies. Who to believe? Not Murdoch or all companies. There's lots of things Boris could do. So we're in resistance. If nobody does, we're screwed. Inciting violence is helping to silence the science. The bad guys love your compliance. Stop taking it up the... Seriously. Right, so David King has said, next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity. The choices we make now count. The Environment Agency says adapt or die. I always prefer Blur anyway. Rage Rover Tank Girl, come on, let's chat. Insulate Britain.